Hi, my name is Francine and I have ovarian cancer. We don't know how long I have, so my job right now is to make every day count. All right, that's my test. Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing well as always. I'm having an okay day. I do think I'm going to have to take some ibuprofen or some kind of NSAID for my hands. We're getting a sleet storm later, and I kind of feel it. So today it's story time again. And I want to talk to you about a doctor named Paul. Let's see, Kalathini. He is an Indian American, a Stanford neurosurgeon who wrote a memoir before his death from advanced lung cancer in 2015, just shy of his 38th birthday. He wrote a memoir about his journey as a doctor and a patient, reflecting on life, death, and the meaning of both. His story and the letters he left behind have been deeply moving for many who have read his book. I will share how to get a copy of his book toward the end of the video. And this book made the New York bestsellers list for nonfiction, like maybe for a year. So in an article by Tracy White on Stanford.edu, palliative care expert Timothy Quill held an intimate conversation with this 37-year-old Stanford neurosurgeon suffering from advanced lung cancer as an example of how physicians should talk to patients with serious illnesses about the quality of life care. So obviously, Quill is playing the role of the doctor, and Dr. Kalathini is playing the role of the patient. All right, so keep in mind this is a training exercise and they're in front of an audience. And I'm going to read a few excerpts so we can learn more about his story. Okay, so Dr. Quill starts. Are there things in particular that you worry about now? Said Quill, professor of psychiatry and medical humanities at the University of Rochester School of Medicine. He's an expert on end-of-life decision-making and how to preserve quality of care for seriously ill patients. Kalathini, a husband, new father, and a writer who recently completed Stanford's neurosurgery residency program, paused for several seconds before responding. Not really, he said. I'm sad at not seeing my daughter grow up and probably not being there long enough for her to have memories of me. I try not to worry about things I can't control. I worry about getting my book finished. I'd like to have that done for my daughter to know me. How are you now? Quill asked, to open the conversation. I'll give you my medical history in 5 sentences, if I can, Kalathini said. I was diagnosed in May of 2013, in my sixth year of residency. At the time, I was having a lot of back pain, night sweats, fevers. I was diagnosed with lung cancer. I responded well to Tarceva, a chemotherapy drug, for about a year. Then I had a relapse last spring. A course of chemotherapy which was extremely difficult with a number of complications. I was able to finish the residency. Right now, I'm still kind of recovering from that cycle of chemo. My last hospital visit was around July 1st or 2nd, and my child was born July 4th. Then he goes on to talk about his initial diagnosis. Yeah, I was able to look at the CT scan. It was very dramatic. My lungs were filled with nodules. Seeing that confirmed my suspicions. Seeing how widespread it was, I figured my life expectancy couldn't be more than a few months. The crowd listened to Kalathini tell his story of his diagnosis and how his life changed after that day in May of 2013. My first thought was my wife and I should marry as soon as possible, and we should redo the mortgage on the house, he said. He said he assumed there was no way he'd be returning to his residency. The next day, he met with his Stanford oncologist, Heather Wakely, MD, who he complimented as being superb at supporting him both medically and emotionally throughout the next year and a half. What do you remember about getting hit with the bad news the second time? Quill said. Seeing a big tumor where there wasn't one in the prior scan was sort of expected at some point. Well, I thought, it's now. The idea that my lifespan was still going to be curtailed was always present in my mind. The hardest part is still thinking about how my wife and my parents and my siblings will react. I have the easy part. I'll just be dead. Is a cure still on your radar screen? Quill said. A cure is never really on my radar screen. It never really was. There's a 1% complete remission rate. It's really now about the length of life left, the quality of life. How many good years do I get to have? Kalathini asked. During the presentation, Kalathini spoke to the physicians in the audience, urging them to prepare patients as much as possible for the experiential landscape of living with a serious illness. As he found, as a patient, solace in poetry, in his writing, in his family and friends. Talk to your patients, he said. Listen to them. Paul died not long after this presentation, and I'm sure he touched the lives of many of his colleagues. What a great legacy to leave to his profession, as well as his family. Now, let's fast forward about 5 years. This is where Lucy, Kalathini, and Katie, now 5, like to picnic. And as Lucy Kalathini wrote in the epilogue to the book, it is where the little girl rubs the grass as if it were Paul's hair. The beautiful, tranquil setting befits the spirit of the man who wrote about dying with grace, elegance, and composure. An article about Lucy was actually published in an issue of Stanford Medicine magazine, and I'll read a few of these heartfelt excerpts. Author Paul Costello writes, Kalathini at 40 is hardly what one would think of as a widow. She's a doctor also, by the way. Young and exuberant, you couldn't imagine this woman had buried her husband at 36. So I was curious, does she relate with the word widow? It seemed so stodgy and out of sync to me. I wondered if she would embrace it. I actually like the word widow, she told me. All of that, the starkness, the isolation of shockingness of the word widow. It felt appropriate. It felt accurately descriptive. I found it was right for me. I really, really owned it. In the intensity of the pain and fear that accompanied learning her husband's prognosis, the couple decided to have a child. How, I asked her, did they choose to start a family knowing the father would be gone and she'd be parenting solo? And especially, how did she do it while forging through a tunnel of grief? It was pretty crazy to do that, Lucy admitted. He was more sure than I was that he wanted to try and have a child. At the end of the book, and in a related Stanford Medicine magazine article, there's a passage so achingly painful it brings tears to your eyes. What is the gift, Paul Kalathini asks, that an infant gives to a dying man? And how should this daughter consider her young life when she thinks of him years from now? He wrote, "Do not, I pray, discount that you filled the dying man's days with a joy unknown to me in all my prior years. A joy that does not hunger for more and more, but rests satisfied. In this time, right now, that is an enormous thing." Yeah, that is emotional and really profound. His memoir, an autobiography book about living while dying, was translated into 39 languages and spent 68 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. Sometimes, even on the same page, it both rips you apart and makes you laugh. The book is entitled When Breath Becomes Air. I do think I saw it on Amazon. I'll look again and link the description down below along with the book title. In further study, I found that Lucy has a twin sister named Jo. Just J-O is what she goes by. And she has a blog online at cupofjo.com. And I found this on her blog that, I don't think about this child was about 5 in that last picture of them at the gravesite. And I think she would be about 10 now. So I don't know exactly when this blog entry was written. I couldn't find a date, but Jo writes, "My sister Lucy was devastated, to say the least. A year of deep grief, still dreaded returning to an empty house. Trying to help, how does one really help? We gave her apartment a new look, so she could try for a fresh start with her daughter. I'm not itching to get out like I was before," she told me afterward. "I feel like a fresh, cool lady in my house." Of course, Paul's photos and books, including his tattered neurosurgery textbook, remained happily in the home. He was still there and always will be. "Paul is in the air," she said. "He's in the mix." So this past summer, on the phone, Lucy was nervous but excited to tell me her news. "I've met someone," she said. "His name is John." John's wife, a poet named Nina Riggs, also died of cancer. So, the universe works. This was not a coincidence. I mean, a little while ago, I mentioned that Paul found his solace in his writings and in poetry. That's crazy. Had also died of cancer, Lucy told me, and she'd also written a memoir during her final days. Lucy had been in touch with Nina and even wrote a blurb for her book. When Nina died, she knew her. That's crazy. And when Nina died, John reached out to Lucy for advice on how to grieve, sleep through the night, and, as he said, not go insane. That week, I found a copy of The Bright Hour and devoured it. This is Joe talking. And The Bright Hour, I'm assuming, is the name of Nina's book. At first, to see what John was all about, but soon to fall head over heels for Nina and her take on motherhood, family, books, love, and loss. Certain lines took my breath away, including this part about her 2 sons. Their very existence is the one dark piece I cannot write with all of this. I can let go of a lot of things: plans, friends, career goals, places in the world I want to see, maybe even the love of my life. But I cannot figure out how to let go of mothering them. Okay, it's a little emotional. But how amazing the world works the way it does. Here, these 2, I just don't believe there's a coincidence. I just don't. I mean, the odds that, I know that there are widow and widower groups where people come together, and I do know that God has a hand in a lot of things. But it seems like it was crazy coincidence. But it just wasn't. And so I'm just really happy for Lucy and John. And sounds like Katie has 2 brothers. And I did not look for updates, but yeah, that both of those books would probably be interesting reads. I wonder if there were a lot of coincidences even in them, I mean, I just think that Paul and Nina had a hand in this to make sure that their loving partners would have other loving partners. So that's not crazy, right? That's not crazy. No. Okay, so yeah. Let me know if you would like more stories, because I really enjoy that. I really enjoy bringing these entities forward. They were people and they had something to say. All right, until next time, love you all. Bye.